What's up, Pokemon trainers?
I'm Nick.
And I'm Juan. And this is Trainer Tips.
If you're like Juan and I, you've probably been using the same phone for the last couple of years, and you're thinking, now that Pokemon Go is coming out, it might be a good time to upgrade. After all, who wants to start a new adventure with a busted Pokegear?
Nobody. So what we did was we actually put together a list of some surprisingly solid budget phones for you guys to start something new.
The list we're about to go through is in no particular order, so we're not trying to endorse one phone over another, we're just making you guys aware of some options that you have.
Anyone interested in actually getting an in-depth analysis on these phones can easily just jump on Google and read the reviews.
Before we get into our list of phones, there's one important thing that I want to cover. When you're buying an unlocked phone, it's pretty important to consider network compatibility. It's not guaranteed that your network's frequencies will work with that phone. So, in order to figure all this out, there's an easy site that you can use. It's called willmyphonework.net. And you'll just go here, choose a brand, model, submodel of your phone, and then choose the country you live in and the network carrier that you're using. And once you hit search, it'll pull up the results. It'll show you if your phone is compatible with their 2G network, 3G network, and their 4G LTE network, depending on which carrier you're using. You can also scroll down a little to find out how to interpret the results. So a blue check means that phone is completely compatible. The green check mark means that it's partially compatible, which means, for example, the OnePlus X lacks one of the frequencies that T-Mobile in the US uses for LTE, which means that sometimes you will not be able to connect to LTE, even though T-Mobile may have LTE coverage in the area that you're in. Be sure to check the compatibility of any phone you're interested in buying before you actually go ahead and make the purchase. So with that said, let's go ahead and start looking at some phones. So the first on the list is the Alcatel One Touch Idol 3. And this phone actually comes in two different sizes. There's a 4.7-inch version that costs $175 and a 5.5-inch version for $225. So the specs are slightly different. With the 4.7-inch, you're going to get a 720p IPS display, a 1.2 GHz quad-core Snapdragon 410, 16 GB of internal storage, and 1.5 GB of RAM. With the 5.5-inch version, that's going to cost $225. You're going to get a 1080p IPS display, 1.5 GHz octa-core Snapdragon 615 processor, the same 16 GB of storage, and 2 GB of RAM on this version. So the next phone on the list is the Asus Zenfone 2 Laser, which is available for $200 on Amazon. This phone comes with a 5.5-inch 1080p IPS display, a 1.7 GHz octa-core Snapdragon 405 processor, 32 GB of internal storage, and 3 GB of RAM, which is the highest on this list. It also comes with expandable storage via micro SD card, dual SIM capability, which is great if you're going to be traveling internationally playing this game. You can keep your home SIM in and also buy an international SIM to have coverage in whatever country you're going to. And this also actually has full US LTE support, which is a big deal. It's going to work on AT&T and T-Mobile's LTE networks with no problems at all. So the next phone I'm going to talk about is actually the cheapest on the list. It comes in at just $60 on Amazon, and that is the Blue Advance 5.0. With this phone, you're going to get a 5-inch 720p IPS display, a 1.3 GHz quad-core MediaTek 6580 processor, only 4 GB of internal storage, and 768 megabytes of RAM. That internal storage is expandable up to 64 GB with a micro SD card, but 768 megabytes of RAM is not very much at all. So if you are going to buy this phone to use it for Pokemon Go, that's probably all you're going to want to do with it. It's not going to handle multitasking very well. It might not even handle the graphics, which we don't know much about, but it might not process the graphics of Pokemon Go very well, so there might be a lot of stutter or lag. But at $60, this is a great option for someone who maybe wants to buy a phone for their kid or their younger sibling, so that they can play Pokemon Go. This is a great cheap option for someone who isn't going to be doing too much heavy lifting with the phone. This phone does actually have dual SIM capability, which is great for international use, but you're not going to get any LTE coverage. It doesn't have any LTE radios built into the phone. So network speeds are going to be a lot slower than all the other phones on the list, But again, at $60, it's something to consider. Up next, we have the Blue Life 1X. Now, this is the second phone from Blue on this list, and Blue is actually an American company, but all these phones are built in China and rebranded by Blue, so they're actually sold in other parts of the world under different brand names. So the Blue Life 1X, it comes in at $150, and you're going to get a 5.2-inch 1080p IPS display, an octa-core MediaTek 1.3 GHz processor, 16 gigabytes of internal storage, and 2 gigabytes of RAM. Again, this is expandable storage with a micro SD card, and this phone does have dual SIM capabilities. A lot of reviews have called this phone the new undisputed king of budget smartphones, so if you're interested in the best bang for your buck, this is definitely one to look into. Up next is the Honor 5X, and this is actually made by Huawei under their Honor brand, which is a brand that they're using for budget smartphones. So this phone costs $200, and it is a 5.5-inch 1080p IPS display, 1.5 GHz octa-core Snapdragon 615 processor, again 16 gigabytes of internal storage, 2 gigabytes of RAM, which is pretty standard for this list. So the internal storage is expandable up to 128 gigabytes. This phone also has a nice premium finish. It's a completely metal body with a fingerprint sensor, so that's kind of something that you don't see on a lot of phones in this price range. One thing to consider is that this phone does come preloaded with a lot of bloatware, meaning a lot of apps are pre-installed and you aren't able to uninstall them. So that's just something to consider. It's going to come with a lot of things that might potentially slow down your phone. Up next, we have the 2015 edition of the Motorola Moto G. This comes in two different sizes, but I'm going to focus on the 16 gigabyte version because it does have slightly better stats, and I think it's worth it. So for $220, you're going to get 16 gigabytes of internal storage and 2 gigabytes of RAM underneath a 5-inch 720p display with a quad-core 1.4 GHz Snapdragon 410 processor. This phone is actually customizable via Moto Maker, so you can choose the colors, accent colors, back cover color, and really customize it to fit exactly what you want. Personally, I'd choose Pokédex Red, but what you choose is up to you. This phone has expandable storage up to 32 gigabytes, and one thing that sets it apart from every other phone on this list is that it's actually IPX7 water resistant, which means it can sit at up to 1 meter underwater for 30 minutes. That's actually kind of a nice feature to have if you're going to be traveling with this phone. Who knows, you might be able to take it out into the ocean and find yourself some Pokemon that other people might be afraid to go chase down. Up next is the OnePlus X. This is actually the most expensive phone on this list, coming in at $250, but it's also the most premium phone. So this is a 5-inch 1080p AMOLED display, 2.3 GHz Snapdragon 801 processor, 16 gigabytes of internal storage, and 3 gigabytes of RAM. I think this is the best looking phone on the list. It has a nice premium finish, glass on the back, metal band running around the sides. It has expandable storage up to 128 gigabytes and dual SIM capability. Another great thing about this phone is that they actually offer it in several international versions, so they have versions tailored to Europe or Asia. So depending on where you are in the world, you can actually get a version of this phone that will most likely work on your network carrier. So speaking of international use, this brings us to the last phone on the list, which is the Xiaomi Redmi Note 3. This phone's not going to work very well on US networks, so this is more for our viewers in Europe and Asia. This phone has a 5.5-inch 1080p IPS display, a 2 GHz octa-core MediaTek processor, 16 gigabytes of internal storage, and 2 gigabytes of RAM. And for $50 more, you can actually bump that up to 32 gigabytes of internal storage and 3 gigabytes of RAM.
So those are some of the phones that you guys can use to be able to play Pokemon Go. Let us know in the comments what phone you guys are going to be using.
And as always, thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more trainer tips.